Hey guys, welcome back to Bad Tabletop Gaming. I'm your host Bill. I'm joined with Brady. We're going to be doing the Space Marine Codex review, and we'll just jump right into it.
Well, first off, it's an awesome codex. We got lots of information coming into this. It's pretty packed with information about what you need to do to start your chapter if you're looking at starting one of the first founding chapters. We're definitely coming in a good way through this book. You got a lot of successor chapters that are giving information. So if you're an Ultramarines player, it's giving you all the information about how to paint your guys, what colors to do your shoulder pads, what tokens and logos go where, and then it goes into your successor chapters, and we pretty much got everything for everyone in these. So you have your Ultramarines, you have your Imperial Fists, Salamanders, Iron Warrior, Iron Hands, pretty much anything that's first founding except for Blood Angels, Space Wolves, and Dark Angels. So jumping right into the rules section, what we have is the biggest change coming out of this book that we can come across is, well, the first major big change is the inclusion of Angels of Death. So Angels of Death is a really cool rule that's coming into effect. So before in the Space Marine Codex, almost all the Space Marines, just their troops, scouts and the likes, they got the keyword, and they shall know no fear. So what that allowed them to do was to reroll a failed morale test. But going forward now, they have the Angels of Death keyword. So they still have they shall know no fear, but instead of re-rolling a failed morale test, you're allowed to re-roll any dice on a morale test. So say you have that one Space Marine that's locked into combat and he's already lost 9 guys, and you roll, or that's a bad example, but 5 guys and you roll that 6, or that you roll that 1 and he passes, but you want that guy to disappear, you re-roll that dice and you get that 6, and then all of a sudden that guy disappears, and then he's not tied up anymore.
Yeah. No, that's pretty sweet. That's definitely adds a little bit of a tactical layer to it for sure.
And some people are saying, well, it's not that fluffy for a Space Marine to fall back or whatever, but I say it's a tactical draw if you need it.
Yeah.
So wrapping into that rule for Angels of Death as well is they've now included Bolter Discipline after that, into that rule. So now Bolter Discipline, if you don't know, is if you're firing a rapid fire weapon, if you stood still, you fire rapid fire at full range. If you are under half range, you get rapid fire. And also, if you're a Terminator, Biker, Centurion, or a Dreadnought, you always get rapid fire.
That's nice.
Yeah. So, still pretty good there. But then the big kicker now is that in Angels of Death, they also have Shock Assault.
Yeah.
So for Shock Assault, it's now anyone that has Angels of Death keyword on a turn in which they were charged, or performed a heroic intervention, they get +1 attack. So, to put that in terms of, say, like Death Company, so you have a Death Company guy with a chainsword and a bolt pistol. Well, he has 2 attacks base. He charges. He gets +1 attack for being Death Company. He gets +1 attack for Shock Assault. And then he gets +1 attack for his chainsword. So that one Death Company Marine is hitting you with 5 attacks on the charge.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Next up we have Combat Doctrines. These are completely brand new to the book. So what Combat Doctrines are is it only works if your entire army is drawn from the same book and they all have the same ability. So all of your units except for servitors and unaligned have to have Combat Doctrines. So you're going to be looking at a lot more mono-faction Space Marine armies, just because the Combat Doctrines offer you that much more flexibility.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so at the start of the game, you start off with the Devastator Doctrine. So what that does is gives all your heavy weapons an additional -1 AP, and it gives all your grenade weapons an additional -1 AP. And then going forward, after the first battle round, you can change your Combat Doctrine from the Devastator to the Tactical, and then that gives all your assault weapons and rapid fire weapons -1 AP.
Oh, wow.
And then in the third turn, you can go into the Assault Doctrine, which is, in my opinion, the best doctrine, because it gives all of your pistol and melee weapons an additional -1 AP. So that Death Company, guy with chainswords on the charge, he's got 5 attacks, strength 4, -1 AP, 1 damage, and people know that -1 AP is really helpful.
It hurts. R.I.P. Orc Boys.
Yeah.
Because that's gonna chew through. Or just hordes in general, right? The -1
cultists
AP.
and
That's
so
crazy.
there is a stratagem in the back of the book as well that lets you. So say you're in turn 2 and you're in the assault doctrine and you're going into turn 3, something happens and all of a sudden you have another big threat. You can spend I think it's a 1 CP. You can adjust your combat doctrine.
Oh, wow.
So you can only ever go forward. You can only go Devastator, Tactical, Assault. But with this CP, you can go from Assault to Tactical or Tactical back to Devastator.
Oh, nice.
So it gives you a little bit more flexibility in there. Going into the book proper, there's been quite a few changes. Units in Mark X Grav Armor. So you're talking your Captain in Grav Armor, your Aggressors, and your Inceptors all in Gravis Armor. They all get an additional wound, so they're now 3 wounds. So it makes them a little more survivable, which is good.
No doubt.
You got some changes to your weapons, like your Captain in Phobos Armor, who had the Mastercrafted Stalker Bolt Rifle, that gets an additional damage. All the Stalker Bolt Rifles are now up to damage 2. So you can have a intercessor squad, say you have a 10-man intercessor squad with Stalker Bolt Rifles on the first turn. So it's 36-inch range, strength 4, -3 AP, flat 2 damage, and if you spend 3 command points on those guys, they can snipe characters.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So you're getting 10 strength 4, -3, 2 damage shots at the guy.
And that's -3 because you've got the Devastator.
That's -3 because you got the Dev Doctrine. Yeah.
That's great.
They have tweaked it a little bit that when they go through the war gear descriptions, there was a little ambiguity on how things were taken, and now it specifically states if you want to switch 1 bolt gun, you can switch it for 1 item from the pistol list, whereas before it was like you can switch a bolt gun for an item from the pistol list. So now they're getting very specific in 1 for 1.
Nice.
So I think that's pretty good for clarification for a lot of things.
Yeah.
The new Phobos Lieutenant, he got some upgrades. He now has, if he takes a Grav shoot, he can now get the Terror Troops. So what that does, for you guys that don't know, is if they're within 1 inch of an enemy and they have the Terror Troops, it's -1 to their leadership test.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but now in the original Space Marine Codex, it was just -1. But now in this new Codex, it's -1, but it's cumulative up to a -3. So say you have a squad of Reavers in that fight, and you have 3 guys within that 1 inch of an enemy unit. That unit is now -3 on their leadership test. So it gives it a little bit more buff. They gave the lieutenants smoke grenades, which is very situational. Smoke grenades are something that are pretty new. You can forego your shooting and get -1 to hit going forward.
The Phobos Armor, that's the new one that came out in Shadow Spear, the style characters?
Yeah, and that's what they're coming out with, the new ones. So you have the new Incursors, Invictor Warsuit, the Impulsor. There's a new kit coming out for the Space Marine Eliminators, which were the snipers in Shadow Spear, but now they're coming out with their new guns, which are pretty good. So now, moving forward a little bit more into the book, we're into chaplains, who actually got quite the change. So before, a chaplain was within 6 inches, you reroll all failed hits in the fight phase. You could use their leadership, and they had a 4+ invulnerable. But going forward, you can still use that 4+ invulnerable in their leadership, but now they have what are called litanies, and they have litanies of hate, and they have litanies of battle. And so these are very similar mechanic to the Chaos Space Marines Dark Apostle.
Yeah, like their prayers, right?
Yeah, exactly. So far, from this codex, there is no way to buff the chaplain's litanies, whereas the Dark Apostle, he can take 2 Dark Disciples for, I think it's 10 points or something, and he gets +1 to his roll for each Dark Disciple within 3 inches of him. So he can actually, he's pretty much hitting it on a 2-up, whereas so far I've come across nothing in the Codex that increases the roll for the Space Marine Chaplain. But he's got some cool litanies. He's got one litany for so an example is the Recitation of Focus. So on a 3-up, he can pick a friendly chapter unit within 6 inches. When resolving an attack made with a ranged weapon by a model in that unit, add 1 to the hit roll. So chaplains are pretty cheap now. I think you can get a chaplain. The Primaris Chaplain fully loaded out is 77 points.
Can't go wrong.
Yeah, so you're putting the chaplain in the backfield. You give them to your, say you have a Devastator squad with 4 las cannons. That Devastator squad is now hitting on 2s.
Yeah.
Strength 9, -4 AP with the Devastator Doctrine for D6 damage. So going forward, I think lately you've seen the meta kind of shift from vehicles to hordes, and it's kind of going back to vehicles right now a bit with the nerf to the Castellan and stuff. But I think with the way this book is written, it's going to give Space Marines the options to effectively fight hordes and vehicles. So I think you're actually going to see more of the meta shift to more of a balanced list of hordes and vehicles. Because even if you take like the grav cannons went down in points, so they're down 8 points a cannon now, and a grav cannon now is heavy 4 shots, strength 5, -3 AP base, but -4 AP in the first turn with the Devastator Doctrine, 1 damage or D3 depending on the target save. So those orc boys you were talking about, the squad of Devastators with grav cannons is 16 strength 5 -4 1 damage hits. So
just mulch through you.
They'll just mulch through you, and then they got a group of las cannons behind you shooting your trucks.
Yeah.
So
from just briefly looking at the book, it definitely looks like you're saying, like you'll see more mono Space Marine armies, which I think is a good thing too. It's nice to see books like stand on their own and have standalone forces, so that'll be really sweet to see.
And I think that's GW has said that they don't want to get rid of soup, but it seems that they're giving us a lot more tools to build mono faction, mono codex books. Like you could build an army out of this, but there is the new supplements coming out for the first founding chapter, so we won't even get into that because they just turn more things on top of their head. So back into this, so we'll go into some troops. The intercessors going forward, still really good, still really points efficient. Like I said, their stalker bolt rifles went up 1 damage. Their auto bolt rifles, which before they're a little more expensive, but they can still do quite a bit of work. They went up to assault 3 shots from assault 2 shots, so that's pretty good. There's still 24-inch range. There is a stratagem in the back that if the auto bolt storm rifles are within half range, they auto hit. So you can get a squad of 10 guys. They're putting out 30 bolt rifle shots. If they're within 12 inches, that's 30 auto hitting bolt rifle shots. So yeah, that's something definitely to keep in mind. Talking about intercessors, their sergeants got a bit of an upgrade. Before they could take a power fist, chainsword, or power sword, but now GW has decided to just give the intercessors a little bit of hey, keep going, guys, because now the intercessor sergeants can take thunderhammers.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and there's a few ways to buff it. So an intercessor sergeant has 3 attacks. He has 4 attacks on the charge with Angels of Death. There's a stratagem to make them veterans for 1 CP. So then that gives them an additional leadership and an additional attack. So that veteran sergeant is now charging in and he's hitting you 5 attacks with the Thunder Hammer on the charge.
Wow.
So, and then the rest of his guys are. I think you can get a 10-man intercessor squad up to 50-ish attacks on the charge.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. Intercessor sergeants can now take a hand flamer. My opinion, it's not worth it. You're foregoing your bolt rifle. It is a pistol, but it's strength 3. So if you're charging a group of cultists or guardsmen, because they've gone to the way of chaos, then have at her. Tactical Marines went down a single point, I believe it was. Nothing much has changed for those guys. We have the new Infiltrators. They got a bit of a change to their squad loadout. Before, with the way Shadow Spirit was written, you could take Infiltrator Sergeant, 4 Infiltrators, and then an Infiltrator Helix Adept, which is pretty much just an apothecary that goes into the unit.
Oh, okay.
So to get the Infiltrator Helix, you had to have a 6-man squad, but they just reworded it a bit, so now that you can have a Sergeant, 3 Infiltrators, and a Helix, so it can still be a 5-man squad. So they've just done a little bit of tweaking of the words on that. For those that don't know, the Infiltrators, they're more expensive than Intercessors, but they do have... it's called an Omni Scrambler, and what that is you cannot deep strike within 12 inches of that unit. So, and they also have concealed positions, so you can deploy them outside of your deployment zone. So you can make a pretty effective anti-deep strike bubble. So that's good against drop pods that are coming.
Oh yeah.
And Gene Stealers and other Adeptus Astartes that can infiltrate, or jump packs or whatnot. Another cool thing that the Infiltrator squad got was it's called a comms array. So what the comms array is it's a war gear upgrade, and it allows, so say you have an Infiltrator squad that's at mid-board and you have a captain and a lieutenant that are back in your deployment zone. So you give this Infiltrator the comms upgrade, and that Infiltrator squad now acts as if they were in range of the captain and the lieutenant.
Oh, wicked.
Yeah, so they're now getting granted that aura of reroll 1s to hit, reroll 1s to wound, even though they're outside of 6 inches of the captain and the lieutenant. So it makes them a little bit more independent, but still good.
Yeah.
The new ones that GW has previewed in the last week or so, it's called the Incursor Squad. They're pretty good. I think they're expensive personally for what they do. Their guns are rapid fire 1, strength 4, AP 0, 1 damage, but they ignore cover. So you don't get a cover save on them. So if you're shooting at Eldar Rangers, they don't get their +2 to their save for their Camelin cloaks or whatever it is. Another cool thing about them, which I think is why they are pointed the way they are pointed, is they get, it's called a multi-spectrum array. And what that does is it ignores hit modifiers. So these guys can be set up concealed positions. So say you have them halfway up the board and your opponent he's playing Chaos and he's got the Plague Bearer army in front of you, and that Plague Bearer army is -2 to hit.
Yeah.
Well, these guys ignore that penalty. So they're still hitting on 3s. So while good, I don't think it's great for how much those models are going to cost you. Because I think it's 19 points a model.
It's expensive for sure.
Yeah. So they're a very expensive, very niche unit. And the way that rerolls are happening and written for chapter masters and stuff, and Gilliman, Calgar, Corso Khan, those kind of guys. In the original book, it was written that they would reroll all failed hits. And so you're shooting at those Plague Bearers, and you're shooting on 3s, but you're actually hitting on 5s. So when you got your full rerolls, you weren't actually allowed to reroll your 3s, just because of how the modifiers stacked and modifiers apply after rerolls and yada yada yada. But with the new wording, you're now going to be allowed to reroll those 3s.
Nice.
Which is pretty good. So They've done a good tweak there. They're starting to go into the realm of reroll hits, not just failed hits, so that modifiers aren't as detrimental to most armies anymore. They have a haywire mine, so what that does is you place the mine down, and any unit that comes within 3 inches of it. Yeah, any unit that comes within 3 inches of it, you roll on a d6 on a 2-up. That unit suffers d3 mortal wounds, or if it's a vehicle, it suffers d3 plus 1. So it's a very situational mine. Again, is it worth the points? Personally, I don't think so. Pretty much going through the rest of the book for a little while. Nothing's really changed. There's a couple little tweaks here and there. One thing that I'll talk about though that I think is a very cool unit that's getting come into. A lot of people aren't a fan of it, just the way it looks.
I'm talking about the suit.
Yeah.
The war suit.
Yeah. So the Invictor war suit, it's for fully loaded out with the twin autocannon, you're looking at 136 points.
That's cheap, man.
It is
super cheap.
It is super cheap. He's tough 6. He's got a 3-up save. Like he's a pretty good unit. He gets concealed positions, so he can get set up anywhere on the board. That's more than 9 inches away. He gets the Angels of Death, so he gets the +1 attack on the charge. His gun is heavy 6, strike 7, -1, 2 damage, but it's -2 on the first turn with the Devastator Doctrine. He's got a pistol heavy bolter.
Yeah, that's the best part. Yeah.
So he can actually shoot his heavy bolter into combat as a pistol and then punch you in the face after he's done with that. So a lot of people are like, it's stupid, the model's stupid. I personally think it's an awesome model. It's just like a stripped out Redemptor. So I think he's great, but I'll let you decide what you want.
Just remember the rule of cool.
Exactly.
You'll always be okay.
You know Bill's gonna have an orc one somehow.
Yeah.
For sure. He's
Sure.
gonna have a knob in there or something, and all of a sudden it's a big mech or something. I don't know. So Centurions, both the Assault and the Devastator squads, they got an extra wound, so that's pretty good for them. They're now Strength 5, Toughness 5, 4 wounds instead of 3 wounds, so it makes them a little bit more survivable again. They all got an extra attack, so on your Devastators, not so big a deal. If you're running the Assault variants, which have gone down significantly in points as well, that extra attack, coupled with Angels of Death, means your normal Centurion now has 5 attacks on the charge. So you're looking at 5 attacks, Strength 10, -4, 3, flat 3 damage. So, in my opinion, if GW had really wanted to make your Assault Centurions a little bit better, they would have increased their movement. They're still only movement 4, so you're kind of there's not a good way to transport them. I've found they take up 3 slots in a vehicle. Like a Land Raider, they take up 3 slots. So they need an effective mode of movement. Otherwise, you have these expensive robots that are just trying to slog up the field, and at 4-inch movement, by the time they're going to get into combat, they'll get that additional -1 to their AP because it's turn 3, but you might only have 1 or 2 left out of a full squad. But
yeah, exactly. Or you're going to get kited across the board and not in the combat at all.
Yeah, so I think the assault variant definitely could have used a little bit of help with their movement. The next unit that I'm really interested in talking about, the Devastators for the Marines. They got a little bit of a change. So they used to be able to take a Cherub to after one model is shot in that squad, you use the Cherub, and it then lets you shoot with that model again. Pretty good. So what they've done actually between this book and the old book, though, is they've taken out the stat line for the Cherub. So the Cherub is not actually counted as part of the unit. So in the first set of books, the Cherub it could be used as a model. It could take a wound for you because it had a stat line and stuff.
Oh, okay.
It would take up a spot in a transport if you took it. Just so now the Cherub it's there, but it's no longer considered part of the unit. So
It's just like God Orderlies or Oilers.
Yeah.
They're there for show, but that's about it.
Yeah, and then once you use that cherub, it gets rid of it, so it's gone. The signum wording changed. In the original Codex book, the sergeant could nominate one person in his squad, and after that one person is nominated, they get +1 to their hit roll in the old book. But in the new book, it changes their ballistic skill to 2. So there you go. It's another way, in my opinion, that they're trying to combat hit modifiers again, because +1 to hit on certain weapons, it allows them to proc different abilities. Whereas if he's just ballistic skill 2, so say you had a las cannon's not really an example, but a heavy bolter, and you needed it to proc on a 6 to explode. With the +1, you could actually get that to proc on a 5 because of modifiers, but now with ballistic skill 2, he actually has to get back up to a 6. So I think it's a good change. I think it's definitely another way that they're trying to curtail all these stacking modifiers that all of a sudden everything's not exploding on like 4s and 5s and 6s, whereas originally they just intended it for 6s. Because in I think it was this Space Marine Codex, the Imperial Fists, who they got a bit of a change to their chapter tactic. Their chapter tactic in the original book was it was enemy units do not receive cover made from a shooting attack by this army. In addition, you can reroll failed wound rolls for Imperial Fists against buildings.
Yeah.
Which, thank you for the fluff, but
something.
Who in 40k is bringing a building? Honestly. So in the new book, their chapter tactic has been changed to you do not receive cover as well, but now when you make an unmodified roll of a 6, you score an additional hit.
Nice.
So there's that heavy bolter with the signum. He'd be hitting it in the original book. If he had this chapter tactic, he'd be hitting on a 5, and it would explode because it was +1 because it became a 6. So now with this unmodified 6 rule, it's actually getting quite a bit better, because they even had their bolter drill was it was pretty much what their chapter tactic is now. If you rolled a 6+ on your shooting, you got an additional hit. So that's where that 5 became a 6 and exploded, yada yada yada. So you were actually getting exploding 5s and 6s. So you would get, say you rolled a 5 on your heavy bolter and it exploded on a 5. That 5 explodes into a 6, explodes into another shot, and that 6 explodes into another shot, and then that one hit, all of a sudden you had 3 heavy bolter hits, and it was getting a little ridiculous. So it looks like they've removed the bolter drill stratagem, and they've just rolled that into the Imperial Fist chapter tactic, and now it is strictly an unmodified roll, so you can't get those exploding 5s, which is a much better way, makes the game a little bit more fair. We then have the Eliminators.
Yeah, these guys are
causing a little bit of salt.
I don't doubt.
They're causing a little bit of salt. So they did change between Shadow Spear and this Codex. For one, all their sniper rounds went up in additional strength. So their sniper rounds all went up from strength 4 to strength 5 now. So inherently, you're already doing pretty good. They've changed the wording on how some of the different rounds interact now. So it's pretty good in that regard. I like it. They've now changed it so that the sergeant can change his gun for just a rifle. And the reason I think they've done that is because the rifle is quite a bit cheaper. And the sergeant now has an ability that instead of, he can forego his shooting, but he can now give the 2 other men in his squad +1 to hit and +1 to wound.
Wow, that's pretty good.
So they're going to be in a good place right away. They also got a new gun. It's the Las Fusel. So it's a heavy one, 36-inch range, strength 8, -3, flat 3 damage. So it's pretty good. And with if you're having the sergeant, give them that +1 to hit. These guys are now hitting they're hitting on 2s. They're wounding on, if they're shooting at a knight, they're now wounding that knight on 3s.
Yeah.
They're hitting that knight at -4 if it's the first round because it's heavy, so it's got that Devastator Doctrine. Yeah. And then the part that's kind of rubbing the salt into the wound a bit of Chaos and Tau alike is that this unit now, if they're charged, they can provide their Overwatch, but then they can move backwards afterwards.
Oh, wow.
And they can move up to their full movement backwards. So if you charge this unit the first time they're charged, they can shoot you with Overwatch, and then they're moving 6 inches away from you.
Wow.
So it's very reminiscent of Tau, Fire and Fade, and just, yeah, it's a mechanic that everyone thought was gone, or was very niche, and a couple of units that can do it, but now this unit with it bringing it back is, yeah, it's pretty good. You can have snipers on the front line. They can act as your screen.
Yeah.
Get them charged, and then just fall back from the first charging unit. So you're kind of laughing in that regard. Another unit near and dear to my heart is the Thunderfire Cannon. It's a Space Marine indirect fire cannon. Some big changes to this are it went from BS3 to BS2. So not only did its ballistic skill increase, its save increase, it's also a 2-up save now.
Oh, nice.
It's from a 3-up save. The wording on the how it works is a little bit different, but it's pretty much you still just need a Tech Marine within 3 inches of it. Tech Marine shoots the gun. So that hasn't really changed. There's a couple very powerful stratagems that you can combo now that I can go through. So the stratagems that I've kind of found that you can kind of combo with this is if you go to the very beginning of your turn, you select Tremor Shells for 1 command point. And what this does is until the end of it gives you select 1 Thunderfire, and until the end of the phase, when resolving an attack made by that model, subtract 1 from the wound roll. But if a hit is scored, the target is shaken in your opponent's next movement phase. If a unit that cannot fly and is not Titanic is shaken, have its move characteristic in the result of any advance or charges.
Wow.
So, pretty good for 1 command point. Now, what you can do, until they FAQ this probably, is you then spend 2 command points and you give that Thunderfire Cannon Suppression Fire. What the Thunderfire Cannon with Suppression Fire does is use the stratagem in your shooting phase, so you don't need to use it at the very beginning. And when a Whirlwind model or Thunderfire Cannon model from your army that has not moved this turn is chosen to shoot with, you can choose that model to shoot with an additional time in that phase, but when it does, it can only shoot its weapons that can target units that are not visible to the bearer. Now, a Thunderfire Cannon, you're usually going to put out a line of sight anyways, because you're going to take advantage, so 90% of the units that it shoots at are going to be non-visible because it's hidden. So what it's actually doing, though, is because you get to fire with it a second time, you get to use Tremor Shells twice, because the gun has now changed to Tremor Shells.
Oh, man.
So you can actually effectively shoot Tremor Shells twice at 2 different units. So you're playing a Tyranid player that's got 2 30-man squads of Gene Stealers.
Yeah.
You just put a Tremor Shell into each of those squads of Gene Stealers for 3 command points, and that first turn, that those squads of Gene Stealers, they're half movement, half advance, half charge. So. Oh
man, I'm just thinking about my poor orcs. On their bikes, that's gonna hurt for sure.
So that's pretty good, and with the Thunderfire going up to ballistic skill 2, pretty good.
Yeah.
Keep on going through the book a little bit. We come to another unit that is causing. Well, we'll start with the first of the 2 of the dedicated transports that are causing salt. So, drop pods, they're coming back. You're gonna have to deal with it. GW has now instituted a rule into the book that a drop pod in match play does not, and any units embarked on it are exempt from the tactical reserve rule. So the tactical reserve rule is actually like a two paragraph article that GW has written. But what it essentially says is that half your army has to be on the board, and also you have to, you can only bring in units from reserve after turn 1. Nothing can come down turn 1. But the drop pod wording now says drop pods can come down turn 1. So there's a lot of things that people are kind of already on the fence about, but it's all justified because you can have, because they are dedicated transport, you don't have to follow the rule of 3 with them, so you can't have more than what is required of a drop pod. So a lot of people are actually concerned that one thing that could happen is you could just drop a wall of drop pods in front of your opponent's army, and they're blocked into their army turn 1, which is definitely less than ideal.
Yeah, it's a possibility. It's just, drop pods are a iconic feature of Space Marines, so I definitely think it's good that they're coming back. And if you want to drop, because I don't know how much they were before, but I think they're 85 now, or?
No, so a drop pod now is 63 points, and it's 2 points for the Storm Bolter, so you're looking at 65 points for a drop pod. So they're because they have seen continual points decreases since they've been released in the initial book, you're going to see them more. So that's an effective strategy. There's a lot of ways around that strategy. You can just, so say you're playing the Chaos Army and you got yourself a bunch of Chaos, or yourself a bunch of Plague Bearers. All you got to do is just move those Plague Bearers and touch one drop pod, and all of a sudden nobody can shoot those Plague Bearers because they're in combat.
Yeah.
So there's definitely ways around it. You might start to see a lot of turn 1 Marine Alpha Strikes again. An idea that me and some buddies have been running up together is if you were to just put a squad of the new grav cannons, cheap grav cannons in a drop pod, coming down turn 1, clearing out screens. It's relatively cheap. It's like it's like a 200 point screen clearing unit. It's going to do its job really well. There's a stratagem for grav cannons that they now remove their reroll wounds and reroll hits, or reroll damage, I should say. Sorry. You put a chaplain in that drop pod with his +1 to hit rolls. Those Centurion, or those grav devs are now coming down, hitting on 2s if you're Ultramarines, because they don't suffer the penalties to moving and shooting. There's a lot of things. Another idea that we was talking with another friend of mine that we floated around is to take a Death Watch drop pod. I'm not sure about the viability of this one. I don't have a Death Watch army, so I'm not entirely sure how this would work, but you can take a Death Watch drop pod, put one of their Watchmasters who's going to let them reroll all failed hits. You put a 9-man squad of Death Guard veterans in there with Storm Shields and Storm Bolters. So they're dropping down. They're now going to be in rapid fire range. Each of those guys is putting out 4 shots with special ammunition. And yeah, it spirals fast.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
It's spiraling out of control pretty fast. So another thing that we think is actually going to happen, and I think this is a stratagem near and dear to poor Mr. Bill's heart, is the null deploy.
Oh yeah.
Because the army does not have to follow the tactical reserve rules, you don't actually need to have half your army on the board. So if you have an entire drop pod army, you just need to place 1 or 2 well hidden units in reserve on the table, so you don't get bootsed on the ground where you need to have something on the ground or else you lose. And then you just have 1 or 2 really durable units on the board, and everything else is in drop pods in the air.
And then it just becomes a drop pod party. That's definitely something I've used a lot of in 30K, and I was a little bit sad when 40K transition you weren't able to do that anymore, but as you can see, it's coming back, so yeah. I'm getting excited.
For Space Marines.
Yeah. Yeah, we're still looking for our Chaos Space Marine drop pods. They're lost somewhere. Yeah. Dread Claws are around, but yeah.
Somebody forgot them in a shipping container,
I guess,
somewhere. Yeah. Along with all your guys'. Well, they finally found the container full of Thunder Hammers. So
yeah, that's true. It's true. It's slowly but surely starting to get back there.
Yeah. Now you just got to find those drop pods and storm shields.
Would be nice. Would be nice.
That though, the whole null deploy, I think is definitely going to get FAQ'd when the errata comes out, because it's just gross and it doesn't make sense. Another unit that is coming to the Space Marine world is the Impulsor, which is the Primaris, almost equivalent to a Razorback, but where the Razorback is a pretty good unit, the Impulsor is a great unit. So it can transport 6 Primaris Marines. It can't transport Gravis Marines, so don't worry about aggressors being inside of it, which was a big thing, because it actually has the assault vehicle rule. So what that means is it can move its full distance, and then units can disembark, and then move, and then shoot.
Oh, man.
And so far, it's the only unit that I've come across that has the assault vehicle keywords, or the assault vehicle rules. So Hellblasters in them are still a thing. They'll still be a possibility. But yeah, don't worry about aggressors. They can't go in there. But it's cheap. It's with 2 Stormbolters and a Shield Dome, which actually grants the Impulsor 4-up invulnerable in both shooting and melee. It comes out to 93 points, I think it is.
Wicked.
So if you want, you can send a couple of these up the board, drop some Hellblasters, or even auto Boltstorm Intercessors. You can take a captain or whoever and unload with all your drop them out, move them into range, do all their shooting, and then why not charge your Impulsors and tie up the unit that you just shot at that has to hit your toughness 7 transport with a 4-up invulnerable.
Yeah.
So,
oh, man.
And then it has fly, so it's just going to fly away afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the models that they've come out with that I'm just blown away by. The aesthetics of it alone are just, it looks really, really good.
There is, like, that's how I personally run them. There is, you can put some different guns on them. You can put some missile launchers. You can put some bigger guns on them. Another thing that people are a little leery of is, it's called the Orbital Comms Array. And so what this does, I'll read it for you, is in your shooting phase, 1 model from your army with an orbital comms array that has not been used this battle can be used to call in an orbital barrage. If it does, select 1 point on the battlefield and roll 1d6 for each unit within d6 inches of that point, subtracting 1 from the result if the unit being rolled for is a character. On a 4+, the unit being rolled for suffers d3 mortal wounds. So, again, you have a transport, so it's not limited to the rule of 3.
Oh.
And there is a possibility, unless it gets, again, FAQ'd by GW, that you could put orbital arrays on your entire set of Impulsors, and then just have them all sit in your back line. And then you just pick a bunch of spots all over the enemy deployment, and you just keep rolling those dice, just doing mortal wounds to everything in that little bubble. So, say you have that Chaos player who's got his screen of Plague Bearers, and he's got all his characters inside that beautiful little screen. Well, you just pick that point dead center in that screen, and you just start rolling. Of course, it is on a 5-up, but 5-up happen.
That you do.
So D3 damage to each of those 5-ups on each of those guys within 6 inches. D3 damage, D3 mortal wounds to each of those guys. Like, there's some dirtiness in this codex for sure. Going on, we have the Vindicator. It's still not worth taking, but its weapon went from D3 shots to always D6 shots.
Okay,
so
that's better.
It made it a little more reliable. It's still only 24-inch range.
Yeah.
So that's where it's gonna get hurt a little bit more. But yeah, so for the most part, that's all the units that you're looking at in the book. So not a whole bunch has changed in that regard. What has changed big, but for the most part, Space Marine units have not changed. They're pretty much what you were expecting, the odd points drops here and there. So then going on, we have the new chapter tactics. They've all pretty much gotten better.
Yeah.
There's nothing that I would say is the only chapter tactic that I would say has taken, I want to say a hit almost, but it's not. It's still not a hit. Is the Raven Guard. So what ended up happening to them is all of their units used to be -1 to hit outside 12 inches. So now anything that is outside of 12 inches is counted as having cover, which is a big deal for that +1 to save for your vehicle, because it affects your vehicles and stuff. So if you have some tanks on your back line, they have cover now, even if they're out in the open. But people debate, is the -1 better? Is the +1 cover better? But the second half of their chapter tactic now is if you have anything that's not a vehicle and it's in cover, gets -1 to hit.
Oh, okay.
So playing a little more to the fluff, I guess. If you have a bunch of infantry in ruins, they already get the +1 cover save, so now they get the -1 to hit.
That's not bad though.
It's not bad.
Decent.
It seems pretty decent. The complaint, I think, is because dreadnoughts have the vehicle keyword, they don't get that -1 to hit, whereas before they had the -1 to hit.
Oh.
They get cover now, but if you put a dreadnought in a ruin anyways and it's 50% obscured, it got cover.
Yeah.
But I can understand where some Raven Guards players' feelings are a little bit hurt by it. Successor chapters. This is just a whole dirty ball of wax. So what successor chapters are is if you don't have a first founding chapter or you have your own homebrew chapter, you can go through and pick, unless it otherwise states, you can go through and pick 2 successor chapter tactics. And there are some good combinations, but they're going to be very niche, where it all depends how, if you're a tournament player, how the tournaments are going to allow this to happen.
Yeah. Just
because there's so much variety and stuff. So going forward, you could see like a patrol detachment or maybe like a cheap Vanguard detachment that's just going to use some successor chapter tactics to go along with their other chapter Marines. Because like you can do one of the successor chapter tactics is when resolving an attack made with a melee weapon by a model with this tactic against infantry or a biker unit, an unmodified hit roll of a 6 automatically scores the hit and successfully wounds the target. You do not have to make a wound roll. So you could put this on, say a squad of Vanguard veterans, where not being quite as good as Death Company, you put a Vanguard veteran, you can put 2 chain swords on, so it's still 5 attacks on the charge. You're hitting an infantry unit, and on 6s with a 10-man squad with double chain swords, you're looking at 50 attacks, 51 attacks, and every 6 is a automatic hit and an automatic wound.
That's wild.
Yeah. Another really good one is the Whirlwind Rage. Again, it's a melee-oriented one. When resolving an attack made with a melee weapon by a model with this tactic in a turn in which the model made was charged or performed a heroic intervention, an unmodified hit roll of 6 scores an additional hit. So now, a bit different. You don't get that automatic wound that you did in Duelists. Where Duelists, you can only use it on infantry and bikes. Whirlwind and Range, you can now use on knights and vehicles. And so those 51 attacks, 6s are now an additional hit. So there's definitely, there's a tactic for adding 3 to range. So if you wanted another possibilities, you do a squad of Sterngarn veterans with the +3 inch to range. You give 2 of them heavy flamers, you give the rest of them combi flamers, drop bottom down in front of your orc boys, turn 1, they now have 11-inch range flamers.
Yeah.
So
just mulching through squads. So
yeah.
Wow.
So definitely some play around in here.
What's cool with the successor chapters too? Like it seems very similar to I think it was I'm rusty on 40K, but I think it was fourth edition where you could build successors, but they had downsides you had to pick as well.
Yeah, it's not looking like there is a downside.
No, yeah.
Like, there's nothing. You can't use like chapter specific relics and stuff, but really, if you're a homebrew kind of player and you made your own chapter, this is awesome. Like this you can give your army the fluff that you want and make it the way you want, and I think it's awesome. As a tournament player, I'm a little bit more leery of it because I'm not sure how it's going to work out. Just because I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was explaining to me, like, how do you study for this? Like, how, as a tournament player, how do you prepare for this when you don't know what combination you're going to get hit with at a tournament?
It almost seems like you can't, but the level of, I guess, variety or just the amount of fluff or the ability to build a bear, and lack of a better word, makes it so cool that maybe there is no way to perfectly study for what's coming, right? Like, you might get hit with anything and everything.
And I welcome the challenge.
Yeah.
I guess. I don't have much of a choice, but I welcome the challenge, I guess. Warlord traits, they made most of them pretty good now. They've buffed them, they've reworded them, they've just tried to make people a bit happier with them. So the generic warlord traits are definitely a bit better. You can use those on your successor chapters. The Vanguard warlord traits, which were in the Shadow Spear box, they've definitely reworded those. So in the Shadow Spear rules for the warlord traits, if you had, say, the captain in Phobos armor, he was your warlord. The way the wording was on the warlord traits, you could use them on any marine, any unit in your army, because I believe they just use the Adeptus Astartes keyword. Now, with the Vanguard warlord traits, what you've actually gotten is it actually, I'm pretty sure all of them specifically state chapter Phobos units. So you can only use those on your incursors, your infiltrators, whereas a dirty trick that was happening was the Imperial Fists Centurions. One of the warlord traits is give +1 to hit.
Oh, okay.
So those exploding 5s and 6s are now 4 5s and 6s.
Wow.
So they've definitely, like I said, it seems like they've realized what the issue is with those +1 to your hit rolls, and they're definitely trying to curtail that down so that it's just not snowballing to such a crazy degree.
Well, that's awesome. And it makes sense too, right? Like, it's specifically for your Vanguard, so it should be catering to that Phobos
for your
style.
Vanguard, yeah. Going into the stratagems, the Vigilist stratagems look like they've been rolled into this book, so you don't need the Indominus Crusaders stratagems as much. It looks like they're all in this book already. So that's a bonus.
Yeah.
A couple stratagems, I'll just go over a couple different ones that I actually thought were pretty good now, that they have got changes. So the first one is Chapter Master. So what this does is you pick a captain in your army, and it then changes his keyword from captain, or I think it changes his keyword from captain to Chapter Master. And what a Chapter Master does is it allows you to reroll all your failed hits.
Oh, okay.
All your hits, I should say, not failed hits, hits. Whereas in the original Codex, it was a 3 CP stratagem, and it was all failed hits. So they're doing that rewording, and they've actually made it a bit cheaper. So a 2 CP Chapter Master is actually pretty viable now, in my opinion. Another change is the Honor the Chapter stratagem. So it is now select 1 unit to fight again when it dies, or is it when it can fight again. So you can fight again, whereas in the original Codex, Honor the Chapter was only a character that was allowed to do it. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility. It's still a 3 CP stratagem, but for what it does, it's pretty good. Another stratagem that was quite good that I looked at was Relics of the Chapter. So what this does is, in the original Codex, it was 1 CP allowed you to take one chapter relic, 2 CP or 3 CP allowed you to take a second chapter relic, and that's pretty much been the same throughout all the codexes afterwards. Is for 3 CP you're taking 2 additional relics. What this book now does is it costs you 1 CP per relic. 1 CP gets you a relic, and since this is a stratagem before the battle, you're allowed to use the stratagem as many times as you want. So, whereas in the original book, you're spending 1 CP for 1 relic, 3 CPs for second relic. If you're spending 3 CP now, you get 3 relics.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So if you just want 2 relics, it's only costing you 2 CP instead of 3 CP.
That's nice though.
Yeah.
Still same rules, right? 1 per character.
1 per character. The way the stratagem's worded is you can't take duplicates of relics, which I would hope is obvious, but you never know. Somebody might try and...
it happens.
Yeah. Another stratagem that they've implemented is for 1 CP. It's called Heroes of the Chapter. And what this does is for 1 CP, you can nominate any character in your army, and they can take a Warlord trait.
That's pretty sweet.
Yeah. So now you can give that Smash Captain the Warlord trait that he needs, and or not Blood Angel Smash Captain, but a regular Space Marine Smash Captain.
Vanilla Smash Captain.
A vanilla Smash Captain. He can take a Warlord trait for 1 CP. So you're looking pretty good there. And there's a couple other stratagems. There's the 1 CP stratagem that I talked about that lets you change back your doctrines and stuff. There's a 2 CP stratagem. You can pick an entire unit. That unit can't be wounded on 1, 2s, or 3s. So you have a particularly 10-man intercessor squad, and they get charged by a knight, and you need your guys to stay on that objective. You spend the 2 CP, and that knight's not wounding you on 2s and 3s anymore. So gives you that extra little bit of survivability in certain situations. They have a 1 CP stratagem, which is, again, like I was telling you, the intercessors with all the buffs. So for 1 CP, use the stratagem at the start of the fight phase. When a Primaris, in the fight phase, when a Primaris infantry unit from your army is chosen to fight with until the end of that phase, when resolving an attack made with a melee weapon by a model that unit, an unmodified 6 automatically scores a hit and successful wound. Nice. So you send that 51 attack intercessor squad into a knight, and they're auto wounding the knights on 6s.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is pretty disgusting. So yeah, that's why this book is definitely going to shake up the meta, definitely in the tournament scene, and make Space Marines a lot more viable in just the casual scene. They're not bad in the casual scene. I've played them. I play Space Marines against friends. I play narrative games against friends. But this book I think it definitely lines them up with their fluff a lot more, and makes them the Space Marines that you read about in the books. Yeah.
But definitely, from adding on to what you said, it seems like it'll really put them in a good place competitively, just because, there's been a lot of kind of just reports I've read that they're not quite there, and hopefully this book gives them a big bump up, and you'll see a lot more power armor out there. So a
lot more power armor. The relics, there's been some wording changes, little bits of upgrades here and there. It's pretty generic stuff, though. It's taking a lot of the relics that we already had in this book and just tweaking the wording on them, tweaking how some of them interact with each other. So the librarian disciplines, everything's pretty much stayed the same. There's been a couple little changes. A big one is from me is null zone. So what that does is a model, any unit within 6 inches of the psyker isn't allowed to take invulnerable saves. So that's gone down. It used to be warp charge 8. It's warp charge 7 now. Really good. It's a little more reliable there. You throw a librarian in that impulsor. You send him right up the board, and he stands right in front of those enemy units, and all of a sudden those Gene Stealers or those Plague Bearers aren't getting an invulnerable save from your squad of auto-hitting intercessors right behind them.
Just dying in droves.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of synergies in this book, and it's going to take a while for a lot of people to unlock what those synergies are, but there's definitely some glaring ones, but I think there's also a lot of like little hidden gem ones.
Yeah.
So this book now has the obscuration discipline from Shadow Spear in it. And and then after that we have our new Chaplain Litanies of Battle. Like we said, there's the +1 to hit rolls. You can add one to this add one to this model's attack and strength characteristics. Add one to the damage characteristics of melee weapons. So your Chaplain can go ham if you want him to in a group of enemies if you need him to, or there's like I said, it's going to take a little bit more time to really deep dive into this and find out what all the synergies are, but there's some really good things in here. And then we have our points in the back, definite points changes. Some things have gone down, some things have gone up. The biggest go up is Thunderhammers on characters. They're 40 points now. So your Smash captains are going up. I think it works out to 20-ish points. So maybe you put a Power Fist on them. So
interesting.
Yeah, and that's pretty much everything I found in the new Space Marine Codex with my day with it. So
that's awesome. It's definitely a nice look at things to come for the Space Marines. I think they'll be pretty happy. I know some people I've talked to, looking outside in on the 40K scene, it's definitely an exciting time, especially with just the new stuff coming out, and some people are definitely looking forward to experimenting or browsing the book.
And and that's not even taking into account the supplements yet.
Yeah.
And like just some of the things that you read about, like the Ultramarine supplement already, I think it's my understanding that the supplements have their own combat doctrines as well.
Oh wow.
Depending on what army you're taking, and if like your entire army is Space Marine, I think they actually get their own combat doctrines.
Man.
So
that's crazy.
Yeah, and they have their own psychic power lists. Like the White Scars psychic power list has leaked. I'm not sure if it's been dropped, but it's leaked, I believe. And like they have their own psychic power that again lets you nerf or neuter a charging unit. So they have their own powers, and it just looks like the supplements are just going to take this book and elevate those first founding chapters just even higher.
Yeah.
So,
and definitely for those of you who have or may not have yet the new White Dwarf on the back, Dark Angel's icon. So I'm predicting they're the next supplement book to drop, but we'll see. Check it out. So, well, that was awesome, Brady. Thank you so much for coming down. You're our 40K Space Marine expert to break it open for us, so that's pretty sweet.
Just doing my best.
Excellent. Again, guys, if you like the content you're seeing here, we're gonna really start to amp up the 40K side. Myself, I'm going to be jumping into one of the local leagues that we have running here for EDL 40K. Should be a lot of fun. I'm going to be breaking out my Chaos Space Marines to, get a feel of the game as I get the rest of my orcs ready to roll. And I think it should be really sweet. But please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And keep those comments coming. We definitely appreciate it. It helps us know where you're at and know what you guys want to watch and see in the future here. So. Perfect. Thanks, man.
Hey, no worries, Bill. Awesome. Thanks for having me.